Are you moving to Delaware? Perhaps you're thinking about buying a home here in Delaware? Well, you're definitely going to want to stick around because in this video, I'm actually going to go over, wait a minute, let me set the mood real quick. Hold on. The scary side of real estate in Delaware. So this list isn't in any particular order, so you're definitely going to want to stick around to the end. But after watching, you'll definitely know what to expect or what to beware of when you're here in Delaware. If you're new to my channel, welcome. My name is Windom, and I help people buy and sell homes here in Delaware. I've lived here all my life, and on this channel, I talk about what it's like living here in Delaware. And if you're potentially thinking about buying or selling here in Delaware, I love to have a conversation to see if it makes sense for us to work together. So I'll put my info on screen now and again in the description below. Now, before I get into it, I just want to say that I wholeheartedly believe that real estate is the way the average person generates long-lasting generational wealth. But that being said, there are many dangers out there and things you need to be aware of in order to make the best possible decision and most informed decision for you and your family. So let's get right into it. Now, the first one is property taxes. Now, I know you may be thinking, now, Brandon, you said that Delaware had low property taxes, so why should I watch out for them? Now, let me explain. Property taxes are pretty low compared to, our surrounding states and other states in the US. But the reason why I'm saying you need to watch out and be aware of them is that I don't know how long that's going to be for or continue to be the case. So Delaware has been growing in popularity, and because of all the new residents, we've really just hit over 1 million. And with that being said, Delaware is the second smallest state in the US. So just to be brutally honest, Delaware ain't built for all these people, at least not yet. So in order to accommodate all the new residents, Delaware is going to need to upgrade, its infrastructure, healthcare, public utilities, development, everything. So they need money to do that. And guess how they do it? You got it. Property taxes. I mean, just in 2017, they raised the realty transfer tax from 3% to 4% to, clear up a budget deficit they had. Fast forward till now, the transfer tax is still 4%. So I don't think it's going anywhere and it's going to stick around. And it doesn't stop there. I mean, just in 2023, they passed a new House bill that requires reassessments to happen at least once every 5 years. Now, why may this be important, you ask? Well, the last reassessment Delaware had was back in 1985, and I'm saying if it ain't broke, why fix it? I mean, it's worked all these other years and, budgets have been good and everything. Basically, this all just boils down to that if you experience any jumps in appreciation or a big reassessment, that's going to directly translate to a bigger tax bill, which means more money out of your pocket and that your mortgage, at least most traditional mortgages, are going to go up. Now, don't worry. The cities want some of that tax money too. It's just not the state. A ton of cities and towns are increasing their effective tax rate all over Delaware. I mean, Smyrna just effectively doubled their tax rate from 47 cents for every $100 assessed to 94 cents for every $100 assessed. And this isn't the only city following that. I mean, Rehoboth has anticipated 29% property tax increase. Wilmington had another 6%. Newark, another 7.5%. So while property taxes may be relatively low right now, I just don't know how long that trend is going to continue. So it's definitely something you need to keep an eye on. Now, insurance is another thing you're definitely going to want to watch out for. Because remember, like Mr. B says, I pity the fool that don't understand the way mortgages work. So I had mentioned this in another video before, but your typical mortgage is made up of 4 things. It's going to be principal, interest, taxes, and insurance, hence the acronym PITY. Now, your principal and interest are pretty much fixed. Those won't change, but best believe those property taxes and that homeowner's insurance will. So if you see any type of movement in that, increases or decreases, it's going to affect your mortgage. So with home insurances, I mean, they've been rising year over year for as long as I can remember. I mean, I think I saw a stat somewhere. They said in the last 10 years, homeowners insurance premiums have risen about 59%, which is just absolutely nuts. And along with these regular increases that we just see over time, and it's kind of like a double-edged sword. It's a good and a bad thing. And I was actually guilty of this myself. Quick story. So I bought my house back in 2016. Around that time, it was about $230,000. When I got my homeowner's insurance policy, it was for $300,000. So God forbid if my house was to like blow off the face of the earth or be destroyed somehow, I would have got enough money to, satisfy my mortgage and have a little money left over to buy another house that was comparable to my house at the time. But now we're going to fast forward to 2024 and my house is worth $430,000, but I hadn't looked at my insurance since I bought the house. So I was in a really bad predicament. If something were to happen to my house, they would have, paid me out for my policy of $300,000 and I still would have been able to pay my mortgage. But obviously home prices have risen so much, I could not buy a comparable home again for $300,000. So that's definitely not a position you want to be in. So with the homeowner's insurance, you definitely want to make sure you're reviewing it. I don't know, I wouldn't say annually, but you definitely want to look at it every couple of years to make sure that you're still insured for the amount you need, because the good thing is that appreciation happens and your house is going to become more valuable, hopefully, and you want to make sure you have the correct amount of coverage. So this is something I think that flies under the radar a lot that you definitely want to make sure you're paying attention to. Now, the next danger here is going to be maintenance and upkeep. Now, I think this should be a no-brainer, but it's something we have to talk about because I think people greatly underestimate the cost of repairs and just, general upkeep of a home. Now, I know most people know about the big ticket items such as, a roof or a HVAC that can cost tens of thousands of dollars to replace. But they tend to overlook, I wouldn't say minor, but they could be minor, but the less glamorous repairs that come with owning a home. You got things like window blinds. I mean, I never really thought about this, but I bought my house before I have kids. Now I have kids and they have strings and everything. They pull on them and they break them. Now I need new blinds, and these blinds aren't cheap. The stringless ones or the ones that don't have the little folds that you can break off. I mean, they're $20, $30 a piece. And you're talking about 15, 16 windows in a home, and that adds up. That's not just pocket change. Or let's say the garbage disposal goes out because you're putting food down the garbage. Another $200, $300 there is something you really don't think about. Some people don't even know they have garbage disposals. What about the bathroom tub is clogged? The drain is clogged because you have daughters that shed hair like huskies, and now you have to call a plumber out and another $500 out of your pocket here or there. Or this is another great one. Now, a quick little story time. So the first year I bought my house, I'm just minding my business and I get a knock on the door at 7 a.m. It's actually, the people coming to take away my trash, and he says, "Hey man, you have a bubble in your front yard." And I said, "Bubble?" And all this surging water was, creating a bubble in my yard. So I called the water company and said, "Hey, I need you guys to come shut off my water main." And they said, "Okay, we'll be right out." They come out 8 hours later and turn it off. And then when I asked, I said, "Hey man, so how you guys fix this type of thing?" They look at me and say, "Well, that's your responsibility. We handle the connection from the street, and anything past that is your responsibility." And I said, "What?" So I got quoted on this, and they quoted me like $2,000 to fix, this little PVC pipe because they had to dig it up and all this other nonsense. And then just to add insult to injury, I got a $500 water bill because it took them 8 hours to come out and, turn off my water, and all I was doing was watering the concrete. And those were only some of the items that I can think of off the top of my head. I don't even want to get started on, landscaping and pest control. And I know some people may be thinking, well, Brandon, you can do all that stuff yourself. If you're someone like me who has, I have 3 kids, they're in school, they have extracurricular activities, and, I'm helping you guys all the time as well. Ain't nobody got time for that. So, I have to pay people to do these things. So just something to keep in mind, the upkeep. And, I know people think of the big things, but you need to think about the small things too, because they can definitely add up and kill your pockets over time. The next thing is actually development. And this is something that's very relative to Delaware, because 9 out of 10 times when I speak to someone and I say, "Why Delaware?" 9 out of 10 times they tell me, "Hey, I was just looking for a change of pace. I was looking for something smaller, small town vibe." or just, not as fast paced, or little town suburbia. And as of right now, Delaware has that in spades. But as I said before, Delaware is growing rapidly. But like I said before, Delaware is growing rapidly, and some of those little old towns that only had one stoplight 10 to 20 years ago are now a bustling metropolis. I'm talking to you, Middletown. Or on the opposite spectrum, let's take maybe a community or a development that was great for first-time home buyers, a couple years ago. Now those home buyers decided that they need something bigger because they're growing, and they decide to sell their home, and because they are cheaper, maybe a big investor buys them and turns them into rentals, or maybe they decide to turn them into rentals themselves for a little extra, money, because times are hard. Cash is hard to come by. Now, I'm not saying that this always happens, but majority of renters don't have the same pride in ownership that an owner would have. So sometimes the properties get a little neglected. And because of that, if you have a bunch of them in an area and you're a homeowner, maybe the aesthetic of the neighborhood changes, and not in a good way. So now the aesthetic of the neighborhood maybe goes down, and because of that, your property value goes down, and your quality of life goes down as well. So that's another thing you definitely want to keep in mind when buying here in Delaware, because we are rapidly growing. So you just want to make sure you're dialed in on the area that you're thinking about buying in. The next three dirty little letters, HOA, which stands for Homeowners Association. And honestly, I think it's blown a little bit out of proportion with social media. I mean, for the most part, with my experience here with HOAs in Delaware, it really isn't that bad. For the most part, I haven't had too many clients, if any, complain about a over restrictive or just a crazy HOA. Now, don't get me wrong, they can have stupid rules such as, why can't I have a privacy fence, or why can't I park my RV in my driveway? But I do believe they're a necessary evil when done correctly. I very much appreciate the fact that people just can't have a whole bunch of old cars in their front yard looking like a junkyard, or just start a pig or goat farm, across the street from me in a residential neighborhood. Now, for the most part, most homes in Delaware are going to be in an HOA. I mean, that's just how it is. The developers know that there's a need for housing, so they usually buy up big portions of land, and people usually want to sell big portions of land instead of, selling them piece by piece. So they buy them, subdivide them, and then they build houses on them. And usually, in those neighborhoods or communities, there's HOA. And plus, the average buyer usually doesn't have an additional, just an extra 50 to 100K laying around to buy the land outright and then build themselves, because land loans are a lot different than your traditional mortgages. But overall, here in Delaware, the HOAs are pretty reasonable from what I've experienced so far, and people I talk to. The rules are pretty standard rules, and the fees are pretty low depending on what amenities the actual neighborhood has. I mean, you're talking about maybe $300 a year, give or take. And again, it just depends on what amenities are there. If you have more amenities, obviously it may cost you a little bit more. But this is something you'll definitely want to make sure you review with your realtor and get a copy of the HOA rules and the fees and everything, because you definitely don't want to be surprised after buying your home. Speaking of realtors, there's another video that I did right here on what realtors won't tell you about living in Delaware.